Hi everybody, the video today is all about understanding the basics around dog to dog and dog to human reactivity. I'm Claude from Canine IQ Dog Training. Firstly, a big thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your support. The video today is all about dog reactivity, and we'll be looking at it from the point of view of understanding what aggression really is, give you some kind of insight as to some of the misconceptions around how to resolve the behavior when it happens. I'd like to talk a little bit about the triggers or the reasons why dogs exhibit reactivity, and more importantly, give you an understanding of the behavior around why the dogs feel like they need to be reactive. It's a pretty detailed video. It's actually part of one of my online dog reactivity courses that I'm offering. Hope you find it interesting. As always, appreciate your support. Thanks again. Let's jump into understanding what is aggression. Now, sadly in the industry, not enough dog trainers actually have a clear understanding of how aggression affects a dog, and you can really get an understanding of this by listening to some dog trainers say that dog is suffering from dominant-based aggression, and that one is suffering from fear-based aggression, and that one is suffering from pack-related aggression. All of these things are actually incorrect. Effectively, aggression is naturally unpleasant to a dog, and to a large degree, all aggressive behavior has a foundation in fear. Regardless of how it starts and where it ends up, there's a strong foundation in fear in all types of aggression. And I'll explain what I mean by this. If we talk about the old-fashioned fight or flight, where the dogs either do something to stop you from hurting them or run away because they're feeling like intimidated, there is effectively a fear of injury or death attached to it. So the fear element in bringing out the response in the dog is really important. The next one is dominance. So if we talk even about a really strong, confident, dominant dog, the reason why it would actually show aggressive behavior is because there is a fear that the dog might lose its status. So there's a strong fear element attached to that. And then if we talk about dogs that have got high predatory behaviors, these are the ones like big dogs that like to chase little dogs and bite them and hurt them. That whole predatory behavior has got a foundation of fear of hunger, fear of starvation. So there's a fear element in just about every kind of dog behavioral response that's founded in aggression. And once we understand that all of it is about fear, we know that the whole situation around aggression is really unpleasant. So often being aggressive is effectively the last response in a dog. If you can imagine us as human beings and we're walking down the street and somebody threatens us, we may act a little bit tough to diffuse the behavior, or we may want to leave because we don't want to have an escalation of the behavior. Dogs are exactly the same. They do not want to have an aggressive encounter because they don't know how it'll end up. Now, it's different if we've trained the dogs to be aggressive, but I'm just talking about the average dog in an average situation. So it can be argued that a dog's response in life is all about how to avoid aggressive encounters. Just like us, we want to go through life unharmed, happy, doing our own thing. And believe it or not, dogs are exactly the same. They don't want to have a fight with another dog, and they would rather have a neutral situation with just about every dog. So once we understand that they don't like this situation, it makes behavior problem solving a lot more simple. The next area that I want to talk about is a few of the misconceptions around rectifying dog reactivity. Now, those of you that are looking at this video, you've probably gone through the YouTube search, and there are just so many different opinions and points of view about how to resolve dog-to-dog reactivity. And I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in terms of what really works, what has a negative impact, and what actually further complicates the problem. So the following areas are areas that conventional dog training, I think, needs to reevaluate its approach. The first one, and the most important one for me, is you cannot get a dog to love everything. Now, there are so many dog trainers that are trying to get the dog to love every dog that they're around or every person that they're around. That would be like us saying that I have to love everybody that I'm with at work or everybody that I meet in society. There are people that I meet that I like. There are people that I meet that I could fall in love with. There are people that I meet that I just hate from minute one, and nothing can change that opinion. What I need to learn as a human being is that I have to control the way I respond to all the different people. Just because I like somebody, I can't run up and hug them. Just because I think that I'm in love with somebody, I can't go up and give them a kiss. And just because I hate somebody doesn't mean that I can go and hit them. I need to understand that there's a limit of how I need to interact with people, and dogs have that same thing. We can definitely get the dogs to learn to tolerate, but to get them to love everything is a really big ask. The next thing is that if you're looking at a lot of YouTube videos, just about everybody is using food to overcome reactivity. For some amazing, miraculous reason, a piece of food helps overcome the dog's fear of just about everything or the aggression towards something. And it doesn't work. And I'll give you a really good example. So because dog reactivity has a strong emotional effect on the dogs, I'm going to give you an emotional scenario to you. Just imagine that you're afraid of cliffs and I'm walking you to an edge of a cliff, and just at the point in time that I sense that you're starting to get a little bit stressed, you're not overloading, but you're starting to freak out. If at that point in time I offer you two things, one is your favorite food, or two is to actually remove you from that situation, I guarantee in 99.99% of scenarios you would say, Claude, please take me away from here. What we need to understand with dog reactivity, because it's an uncomfortable scenario, dogs are doing everything they possibly can to remove the pressure, and that remove the pressure is either removing the other dog or removing itself from that scenario. What good training should be is about giving the dog better tools to remove itself from that scenario or to remove the pressure. Food has absolutely zero to do with it. In fact, it actually potentially complicates the problem. So, which is why I don't use food for a lot of different reasons, but I definitely don't use food for behavior modification. The other one is you cannot treat reactivity through ignoring the other dog. Now, there's a lot of training that revolves around asking your dog for eye contact and calling your dog away when it sees another dog, in the event that we're hopefully making the dog realize that the other dog isn't a threat. That's a problem. You cannot deal with another dog unless you deal with another dog. You cannot deal with being afraid of heights unless I get you to deal with being afraid of heights. I can't teach you to be afraid of heights by looking at books. And I can't get a dog to deal with being reactive to other dogs unless I put it in and around other dogs and teach it how to behave. So the importance of behavior modification is actually being in and around what's causing the pressure, but teaching the dog that there are better ways to deal with the pressure. Also, you cannot resolve the issues by treating the symptoms either through reward or punishment. Now, I've been to several dog training sessions with other dog trainers, and a lot of dog trainers are continuously giving the dogs food for showing a better response to another dog, and a lot of dog trainers are correcting or punishing the dogs for barking at another dog. Both of those are effectively incorrect. If I'm correcting my dog every time it growls at another dog, what I'm effectively doing is saying to the dog, don't show me those symptoms, but still have the concerns or the fears that you actually had under the surface. But I'm punishing you from giving me information as to how you're actually feeling. So then what we've actually got is what we call a silent assassin, which is a dog that now is really afraid to bark and growl because it doesn't want to show you that behavior because it's being punished for it. And then all of a sudden, it won't give you that information, so you don't know where your dog is at in the process, and it could be on the tipping point, and we just don't know it, and we've got a much more aggressive scenario at hand. That, to me, is an incredibly bad problem. The next area that I'd like to cover is triggers. Understanding what triggers are will help to better understand how the dog has reached the point where it feels or believes that it needs to react in any given situation. So, what are triggers? Triggers are simply the stimulus or a prompt that makes a behavior happen. Now, it could be a noise, it could be another dog, it could be a smell, and it could even be a location. So those of you that have got a dog that's got a bit of territorial behavior and it growls and it barks at dogs in your neighborhood, or there's a dog behind a fence, I guarantee if you're walking past a fence where a dog usually comes out and gets aggressive to your dog, as you approach that fence, will be giving you certain behaviors. It might be pulling on that lead a bit more, or it might tense up, or it might show more stress going towards that fence. Now, whether the other dog is there or not is irrelevant. That location is enough to generate a behavior response in a dog. That's effectively a trigger. And what we need to do is to understand that there are many, many different triggers that actually produce a behavior response in your dog. And good dog training should be about getting your dog to learn to change its behavior or how it responds to those triggers in a way that removes the pressure that the dog is feeling, but makes you happy as an owner. So in terms of dog to dog or dog to human reactivity, the trigger is the point in time at which the dog chooses to react directly with the stimulus. Now, reacting directly to it doesn't mean jumping on it and attacking it. It could simply be turning and looking at it and tensing up. It could be barking, it could be pulling on the lead towards it. It's at that point in time where their behavior changes from dog being relaxed to a dog having some kind of tension or stress that's actually promoted or produced as a result of that trigger turning up. And this is where the activation may be as simple as direct interest without any overt action. I'll give you a really interesting scenario. I did a training session with a lady a while ago that we practiced some skills inside the house, and then I wanted to see what the dog was like outside the house. So the dog is having a nice comfortable sniff at the base of a tree, and this lady was really, really stressed, and she's looking around and she's really uncomfortable because she wasn't certain what was happening, whether another dog was turning up. And I noticed that there was a dog about 300 meters away, and she hadn't noticed it. So I tapped her on the shoulder and I pointed towards the other dog. Immediately she pulled really, really tight on that lead, and her dog spun around and started to become aggressive or reactive. Now, to her dog, the trigger for being reactive was her response. So every single time she was stressed in a situation around other dogs, before her dog actually responded, she would pull the lead tight and drag the dog in, and the dog would see the other dog and respond accordingly. So that pulling on the lead effectively became a trigger. Now, there are many, many scenarios that will produce similar responses, and I'll be trying to talk you through these in the rest of this course to make you realize that there are a lot of subtle responses that your dog give you and subtle triggers that actually produce a behavior response in reactivity that are subconscious or below the surface, and we need to understand how they impact the dog going forward. I hope I haven't lost you so far. We are definitely getting to the point in understanding the background to behaviors that's a little bit meaty, so there's a lot of science that I'm throwing at you, but please work through it with me because it'll definitely help you to understand what's going on. So what is behavior? Effectively, behavior can be described as the way any organism adapts to the environment that it's currently encountering. Those of you that are currently dealing with a COVID scenario, the behaviors that we are doing now are completely impacted by the virus. So we are trying to make sure that we don't get contaminated. We are doing the best thing that we possibly can to make sure that we can have as normal life as possible, but we are impacted by the scenario that is limiting our movements. The same thing can happen for dogs in every part of life that they go through. So behavior is what we do to adapt. So this is especially critical for dogs because dogs live in the moment and technically not the future. And while we're lucky that we have the ability to reason, we can think, yep, we've got 7 weeks of lockdown, we need to do X, Y, Z and put up with a lot of stress, and we know that it will finish in 7 weeks' time, and that hopefully the pressure will be removed. Dogs do not have that luxury. They are in the moment, and they are stressed as a result of that because they can't imagine that the problem will be over in 30 seconds and they will feel better. They are living in that moment, and what they've done in the past leads to how they'll respond to that situation going forward. So while dogs have the ability to draw reference from the past, they relate to the here and now in terms of a behavior response. Now, this is really important because dogs take cues for what they need to do in the future from what worked in the past. So if every single time your dog was stressed in and around other dogs, it barked and it scared the other dogs away, it will start to learn that if the more that it barks, the more likelihood is that the dogs will actually go away. So it will learn how to moderate its behavior now based on what worked in the past. And humans are the same. We have ways of doing things, and we all have a go-to position in terms of how to deal with pressure and stress. Dogs are no different. The problem is that they get locked into a particular way of behaving, and it's hard to shift them out of that mindset unless we give them really constructive tools to work with. So their future behavior is based largely on past success or failure, especially when dealing with unknown or unpleasant situations. So if you put them in a scenario of being reactive to another dog, again, they won't say that this will be over in 7 minutes because I know that you'll leave in 7 minutes time and all I have to do is be patient until you leave. They don't understand that there's a future component. They just know that this is how they have to react now, and they have to react this way because that's all they know. So good dog training should be about giving your dog lots of constructive tools to change how it dealt with situations in the past that were not healthy or not balanced, to give it better ways to deal with problem solving. So the last slide that I want to talk about is what are the main types of behavior, and it's important to understand that there are 3 distinct categories that we need to come to terms with, and this will impact on every single one of our dogs to a degree. The first one is instinctive behavior. Now that's effectively a set of traits that are in line with a particular instinct, and one of the instincts that gets a lot of people in trouble is the predatory behavior, which is the drive to chase prey animals. So those of you that have got big dogs that like to chase little dogs, what's important to understand is that predatory behavior effectively has got a starting point which is triggered by some form of movement, and then it has a natural range where lots of different dogs have got different abilities to actually do that behavior. Some will chase balls incessantly for hours, others will actually chase a ball for a couple of minutes and then stop. Other dogs like to chase frisbees because balls don't work, but frisbees they can potentially chase because they have a bit more movement and they're more likely to respond. And other dogs are more likely to respond to living things that actually move differently to balls or frisbees. And the whole problem with instinctive behavior is that it produces a natural response to one of these triggers that produces a behavior that can potentially be a problem for us as dog trainers and dog owners, because the more we put the dogs into an off-leash scenario, it makes it difficult to resolve how the dog responds to movement. So we need to understand that. The next one is what's called a learnt behavior, which is effectively a set of traits that are acquired or developed through experience. Now, most dogs, when you put them into a situation of cause and effect, learn how to behave accordingly. So if you put the dog around aggressive dogs, and the only way that the dog is able to remove the pressure is by being aggressive back, the cause is the other dog and the response is being aggressive. So the cause and effect is this vicious cycle that in order to help me remove the pressure, the more I'm aggressive to you in hope that it'll actually remove it. And this is important to understand because every scenario that we put the dog in that reinforces how it responded in the past will shape how it behaves in the future. So it's this vicious cycle. The more I do what I used to do, the more I get what I used to get, and we need to make the dog do something different. The third behavior is what we call a taught behavior. Now, it won't impact greatly what we need to do to fix behavior problem solving with reactivity in the context of this course, but I wanted to show you what this is all about. So taught behavior is a set of traits that are acquired effectively through external conditioning, i.e. being taught how to behave. And the classic scenario with regards to aggressive behavior is how we train dogs for security and law enforcement, where we actually make the whole act of being aggressive something that the dog finds as successful to overcome a particular problem, and it becomes enjoyable because it gives them success, and it's no longer a threat or a stress. It actually becomes something that's a little bit more enjoyable than it was to begin with because it gives the dog success. So instinctive, learnt and taught behaviors are the 3 main behaviors that impact the dogs going forward. Now, because we're dealing with a course on dog reactivity, we'll be concentrating on the instinctive component and the learned component in the context of this course, simply because they're the main 2 that will impact every dog owner going forward. And we need to make sure that we understand how this affects the dog and how we can actually change that behavioral response. So with regards to learnt behavior in particular, there are 2 main areas of learnt behavior. that need to be understood with regards to behavior modification, and they are dysfunctional and constructive. Now, dysfunctional behaviors are behaviors that the dogs will do to try and remove the pressure caused by something, and every time that it does it, it doesn't remove the pressure but makes the situation worse. So in human terms, if somebody is angry, in order to get rid of the anger, they have a bit of a meltdown and abuse people around them. That abusive situation removes the pressure momentarily, but actually makes the problem worse, because it's everybody around them is now sad and the problem still hasn't been rectified. So in many situations, dogs will actually bark and growl to get rid of another dog, thinking that it fixes the problem, but it actually makes their stress levels increase significantly and doesn't resolve the problem. A constructive way is to actually get the dog to show a different set of skills or a different set of behaviors to achieve the same outcome. So these are the two main areas that we'll be concentrating on in the course. Now, these are the two main behaviors impacting stress and the management of stress that, if used correctly, can effectively cancel each other out. So what we'll be doing in the context of this course is taking a scenario that produces a really poor, dysfunctional way to deal with stress and teaching the dog that there's a constructive way to overcome that same stress. I know it's complicated at the moment, but it'll all make sense once we go into it. So it's effectively changing the dog from a bad way to resolve a problem to a good way to resolve a problem. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. I hope it's given you some insight into just how stressful reactivity or aggression is on a dog. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to leave me a comment. And if you want to know a little bit more about my online course in dog reactivity, also please leave me a comment. Any questions at all, happy to answer them. Thanks again, folks. Hope you enjoyed it.